The back of your heads will look beautiful. We don't really have a formal agenda here. The way I look at this, if you remember who I am, it's like a baseball umpire. I've made a mistake. You need to focus on the people up here. You will ask questions. You can write them down, and I can read them. I do have some already. Or if I don't have enough of those, I'm going to look at you for more questions. I do kind of reserve the right to follow up on a question if I don't know that you answered it. And I've lost control of it. Strike one.
Stuck together.
I heard we have 3-minute intros, is that correct?
3 to 5, but not over 5.
Not over 5.
I got my phone right here, you're not going over 5.
All right, all right.
All right.
That's another reason not to have microphones, because then I can't mute you. And I'm not comfortable with that authority, all right?
Forewarned.
As you can tell, we're going to be rather informal. I think that's, unless we have to get more formal. But I think, I want to thank all of you for being here. I don't even know who's sponsoring. Is this the Democratic Party who's sponsoring? Who's sponsoring?
No, it's the town.
The town, thank you.
Webster.
Because if it was a Democratic Party, I'd have to feel like I had to leave. So
Well,
this
no,
all
and I
sounded
think
well-
then the Republicans probably wouldn't have come.
I must have lost one.
We'll just write, there's an extra card here, you can just write it on there.
I guess we're almost ready to. Almost ready to begin. Again, we're going to be as informal as we can and yet get this through this. I don't think they're here to hear me, I think they're here to hear you. So as soon as we're ready to begin, maybe we can begin now and start at that far end of the table.
That's you. You're up.
All right, first of all, I have to correct my name. No
Please
C
do.
in here. It's Kim Strathy. And since I'm up first, I'll stand up and chat with you. Thank you for inviting me to my Webster. It's the first time I've been here, I must say. Well, that isn't even the map I want. It's all right, can't hold on one. At any rate, I am running for executive council in District 2. I am from northern New Hampshire. Grew up in West Georgetown and have recently lived in Lincoln for over 40 years, so I'm a longtime resident of the state. I am running for executive council because I think I will be a great person to serve you in the upcoming 2 years. I'm a knowledgeable person, but I don't know everything. So what I'm here to do is to do the administrative affairs of state and to read contracts and to do everything administratively that we do to run the state. From there, I want to do the most important part of the job, which is to advocate and be a representative for you, the people. And with that, I'm just going to keep it short today because we have a lot of people to introduce themselves, and I'll get into the nitty-gritty of things once you guys start asking questions.
Thank you.
So we'll just work our way right down the table.
Okay, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Dave Croft. I'm your current Merrimack County Sheriff. I'm on my second term as Sheriff. I'm seeking my third. It's great to come back to Webster. I have strong roots here, lived here for many years. Nice to see so many familiar faces in the audience. A little bit about me. I've been in law enforcement for 38 years, 6 years in the Marine Corps. Get out of the Marine Corps, I was a correctional officer for 3 years. I joined the Boston Police Department where I spent 23 years, 11 of those as the chief. In 2007, I was asked by the then sitting county attorney if I would be interested in coming down and running their alternative to prosecution program, which I said I'd be glad to do. I joined the sheriff's office then, and I worked for the county attorney for 15 years. 2020, I ran for office, and here I am today. One of the things that I am very proud of and that I've done over the last 4 years is I'm trying to bring the human element back to law enforcement. Far too often we get that negative vibe, and I think it's important that as your county sheriff and as a law enforcement officer, that we bring back to the constituents that we work for. So what we do is really important, I think, in making sure that we're involved in the community, starting from the top. I'm the Vice President of the Community Action Program for Belknap and Merrimack County. I serve on the Board of Directors for the Concord Regional Food Program, where I'm in charge of the Holiday Distribution Program. Webster happens to be a participant, as well as Salisbury, in that program. I used to serve on the Concord Coalition to End Homelessness. I've since done that, but I made sure that one of my deputies replaced me there, because I think a law enforcement voice on that committee is very important. I have an individual that serves on the Juvenile Justice Board for Merrimack County, and I have another individual that is active in the New Hampshire Special Olympics. Bringing back to the community, as I said, is very important. We have just expanded how many towns we do the DARE program in now. We're up to 5 communities. Webster happens to be one of the towns that we teach DARE in. We just started a new program called LEAD. LEAD is the acronym for Law Enforcement Against Drugs. I just certified a deputy in that, and I'm running out of time. I'm getting the nod over there. Thank you all. I really appreciate your vote in November. That was a quick 5 minutes, Mr. Moderator.
It does go fast, doesn't it, when you're up there?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Nesbitt. I'm a candidate for state representative for District 5, which includes Webster, Andover, Salisbury, Danbury, and Hill. Just a little bit about myself and just give you some basic ideas. My parents are both from New Hampshire. I'm a military brat, so I wasn't born in New Hampshire, but I'm from New Hampshire stock. I've lived here in New Hampshire for the past 60 plus years, so I'm a newcomer by New England standards. I've lived here in Webster for the last 11 years with my wife Chris and our dogs down on Tyler Road. One of the things about growing up in the military is you have an opportunity to see a lot of different places and see a lot of different perspectives, and I think that's one of the strengths that I'll be bringing, is not just from a relatively narrow point, but a fairly broad perspective, and hope to be able to do that. I had 2 major careers in my life. Career number 1 was in outdoor recreation. I worked in cross-country ski areas. I established the first mountain bike touring center at a major ski area in Waterville Valley back in the 1980s. And that was a bunch of fun, but more importantly, I spent the second career as a public school teacher here in New Hampshire, down in Hudson, as a history teacher. And I had a great department to work with. I had a great rapport with the students. It was most satisfying and rewarding parts of my life, but it's also an area I have huge concerns about due to the issues of education here in the state. So I finished up in 2020, and I hope to retire at that point and ride across America. Here I am, running for office instead. So some of the things that I'm really concerned about is, 1, as you might guess, education. Education, the integrity of our educational programs, the cost of our educational programs. People talk a lot about economics, and a lot of our economics would probably be a lot more bearable if we reformed how we pay for it. 80% of our public school funding comes out of the pockets of our property taxpayers, and that's unsustainable. We need to work on that. I'm also extremely concerned about the changes in reproductive rights for women, where it erodes into our ideas of keeping the government out of our bedroom. Certainly, our school safety is an issue. I can't tell you how many drills we had and how much anxiety I saw when we would be actually having officers coming through and evacuating the school. Economic issues, as I mentioned previously to that, and certainly our housing crisis are all things that we need to be discussed about. If I was to sum up myself in just a couple of words, I would say I am pragmatic. I look for solutions from both sides of the aisle. I was able to work in a department that had liberals, conservatives, and libertarians. We were all able to work together. I hope to bring that to the State House. Thank you.
Amen.
This is the one you get. I'm not going to be rude.
An evil eye?
Please.
Good afternoon. My name is Karen Leo Hill. I am a 20-year city councilor and the former mayor in Lebanon, For the last 8 years, I've also served as Grafton County Treasurer. I am very excited to be stepping up to run for Executive Council here in District 2, following in the footsteps of Cindy Warmington. On the campaign trail, I've been sharing the story of my mother, Lynn, who died when I was 6 years old. She died of cervical cancer, the kind of cancer that is typically discovered in routine reproductive health care, the kind of health care that Republicans on the Executive Council have been voting to defund repeatedly. Now, when my father was left with 3 children under the age of 7, he was able to keep our family and his small roofing business afloat thanks to the help of Social Security. Later on, as a young single college student, my daughter Marina was born 10 weeks early, and I was able to go back to college with an infant and finish my studies thanks to the help of Medicaid that covered her 5-week stay in the neonatal intensive care unit. I know firsthand the power of government to improve people's lives. It's why I've dedicated my career to public service and why I'm thrilled to have this chance to bring my skills, my knowledge, and my experience to the state level. The Executive Council is the most important office that you've never heard of. And so a lot of campaigning for Executive Council is actually talking about what the Executive Council does. It is unique to New Hampshire. It is an extra check and balance on the governor. And when I talk about the Executive Council, I use the word CARS. It stands for Contracts, Appointments, Roads, and Services. The Executive Council, there are 5 of us, 5 districts in New Hampshire. I think of it like a big city council for the state. So we approve all contracts of the state over $10,000. Appointments, we approve all appointments to state boards and committees, the commissioners of agencies, like the Public Education Commissioner, whose mission is to undermine and destroy public education, who will be up for replacement in March of next year, which is why we need to elect Joyce Craig as our next governor, so that she can nominate a new education commissioner who believes in public education, and I, as an executive counselor, can vote for a replacement. We also appoint all judicial appointments in the state. And in the context of a super conservative supermajority at the United States Supreme Court that is unraveling the role of the federal government in protecting our most fundamental constitutional rights and civil liberties, we saw this with overturning Roe with the Dobbs decision, but also environmental regulations, voting protections, LGBTQ+ protections. These are all going to be fought at the state level, and appointments to our state Supreme Court and all of our courts are more important than ever. R is for roads. The Executive Council is responsible for the state's infrastructure. Roads, bridges, trains, airports, public transportation are all part of the state's 10-year highway plan, and that is the job of the Executive Council. Lastly, it's about services. Making sure that people, individuals, nonprofit organizations, municipalities are able to connect with the right folks in state government to get answers to their questions and the services that they need. As a city councilor, I've been doing this work for 20 years, and I'm ready to do it at the state level. Are you waving at me? You are. Very good. Well, then I will conclude by saying that I look forward to your questions, and I ask for your support on November 5th. Thank you so much.
It's so good to see all of you, many of you again. I saw many of you this morning. My name is Stu Green. I'm running for State Senate, District 7, so right here. I grew up in Andover. For all intents and purposes, I am a native of New Hampshire, although I can't claim it technically because I was 1 when we moved here. But I did grow up in New Hampshire, and I spent my formative years right in the heart of this district. I went to a variety of public and private schools. I went away to college, a variety of those as well. Worked on a farm, breaking my back and getting tan and buff. Those were the good old days. And then I eventually graduated from college and decided, well, I'll join the Navy. And I'll see how that goes for about 4 years. 4 years turned into 20, because when you blink, that's what happens. I loved my career. I could do everything under the sun, from being an accredited diplomat in Norway, working in a US embassy. I directed a Maritime Intelligence Operations Center in Norfolk and advised the commanders of fleets. I did counterinsurgency analysis in DC for senior Beltway policymakers, such as the President, Vice President, Secretary of Defense, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. I deployed to combat theaters on multiple occasions on aircraft carriers supporting aviation intelligence, among other things. And I deployed to Iraq as well. I had a really good career. And I thought when I was ready to retire in 2019 and return to my roots here in Andover in this district, I could still serve. And I was asked to be town moderator in Andover. We had a reputation for being somewhat rancorous, and somebody wanted us to smooth the choppy waters. So I threw my hat in the ring, it worked out. I think people were pretty well behaved because they were quite literally just coming out of the woods from COVID. But it was not quite enough. I thought maybe there's something more I can do. So I decided to throw my hat in the ring for the state Senate seat. And my goal here as a sworn defender of the Constitution is first and foremost to protect the Constitution. That is extremely important to me, and I'm not going to belabor that point right now. But I will say that if it doesn't come to pass that we need to make those hard decisions in the state Senate as a last line of defense, what I'd like to do is much of what my colleagues here have talked about. Roll back reproductive freedoms to where they were 2 years ago, which is where they had been for half a century. So that's the conservative in me coming back, right? I'm a libertarian in that I believe in the Second Amendment, so I'm a little bit of an outlier for the Democratic Party, but that is a good fit for this district, I have to say. I want to conserve our forests, our lakes, our air. This is extremely important to me. We're a logging community in this district, and a lot of the forest products industry is on the knife's edge, and we need to use state-level enforcement, or rather assistance, to get these folks through and keep that 8,000 employee industry alive. I can't emphasize this point enough, and this is a national security issue as far as I'm concerned. Our schools are under attack right now, and from a number of different vectors of attack. We have to fund it more fairly. We've talked about the property tax issue, which is crushing most of the people in this district, and it's been diminished as a serious problem. Our tax structure in New Hampshire is way out of whack, and although I've been accused of wanting a sales and income tax, I have never said that, and I never will. What I'm arguing for is that we need to stop the blood loss and fund schools more fairly. There's a lot that we can do with creating alternative sources of revenue, and I'd like to look into that. Schools are very important. It's about the next generation. We're forming our new citizens. So thank you very much. I'm sure we'll talk about it more.
There'll be no waving. Good afternoon, I'm Frank Cassidy. I'm running for Merrimack County Sheriff's Office. I grew up in Londonderry, and from high school I went directly into the Marine Corps as my opponent. Upon leaving the Marine Corps after my 4 years active duty, I moved to the town of Epsom, where I've been since. I re-enlisted into the active reserves at that time, and I started my career in the Department of Corrections. My law enforcement career spans 32 years. I'm still currently working for the town of Loudon as a police officer. I started out, while working corrections, I wanted to do more for people, to try and maybe find that fix, help them before they ended up in that position, as well as the victims. I went through the part-time police academy while working full-time corrections. I worked for the towns of Epsom and Loudon part-time while working full-time corrections. In August of '97, after Jeremy Sharon's passing for Epsom, I filled a slot. It wasn't his slot, nobody could fill his slot, but I started my full-time career with Epsom. I went from Epsom to Pittsfield for no other reason than it was a larger agency. They had the detectives division. There was just more for me to grow. I stayed with Pittsfield till 2002, at which point I went to Merrimack County Sheriff's Office, where I worked for Merrimack County Sheriff's Office until 2023, May of last year. I worked all the positions. I obtained the supervisory roles. I obtained training roles, where not only did I train within the office, the sheriff's office, but I trained smaller communities that didn't have the resources. While working in detectives, we worked a lot of, at the time, we were attached to the county attorney's office with an investigator. We worked the sex crimes against kids that many agencies, such as Webster or small agencies, don't have the resources to do or the training. My last 13 years with the sheriff's office, I was assigned to the New Hampshire Attorney General Drug Task Force, where I worked as an undercover drug officer, detective. I eventually became the team lead for my team for the task force. There were 5 teams at the time. By the county putting me onto the drug task force, I was able to investigate all the drugs that were reported to us, the small towns would bring to us, or stuff we would develop on our own. By giving up that one person, I had the resources, the entire Attorney General Drug Task Force, the other 5 teams we could bring in if need be. We worked cases in state that traveled out of state. During that time, I found that it wasn't just poverty or the low income or the young kids with the drug problems. There were many professionals, law enforcement, doctors, attorneys, that we investigated and ultimately ended up arresting. Since I've left the sheriff's office, my opponent has failed to stay part of the drug task force. The problem only continues. If elected, I plan to bring that back and be part of the drug and combat the drugs. DARE is an awesome thing to teach the kids, but it doesn't stop what's going on in real life. It needs to be addressed. I'd also continue with the training that police standards and the governor have set forth with diversity awareness, mental health training. And obviously cost effective with the county, the sheriff's office, by collaborating with other agencies. When we all come together and work as one, it saves costs for all. Thank you. I hope for your vote and support come to November 5th.
Good afternoon. I'm Dan Innes, your state senator, and a business professor, so standing in front of a group like this is just kind of fun. But I'm really glad you're here, and I'm happy to be here with you. You know a little bit about me because I'm your senator and I've been at this for a little while. But I'll share some things about myself that you may not know, and then talk about a few of the issues. First off, I was born in Ohio. We shared a little bit of Ohio memories just now, Kent and I, which was kind of nice. But I grew up in a working class family. My family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and others who were all factory workers and farmers. And that's what I grew up with. My dad was a printer. He worked nights and printed the morning newspaper in Columbus, Ohio. My mother was a part-time secretary. We didn't have much. Nobody had gone to college. My parents struggled to pay the bills. I remember discussions when I was sitting in the back seat of the car. How are we going to make the house payment this month? Maybe we'll skip the electric bill. Those were real conversations. I never ate McDonald's. I didn't have a Coke. We couldn't afford it. But you know what? I grew up with a loving family that valued education and allowed me to discover who I was. And that was tremendous. So I made it to college. I paid my own way. Paid off my last student loan when I was 38 years old and had taken my first dean's job. So I understand the cost of education and how hard it is to get started. But growing up in Southeast Ohio, which is very poor and fairly rural, I grew up around people like we have here. A little wealthier here, in fact, a lot. But the people are very, very similar. They work hard, they have good values, they love their family. And I feel right at home here. Been here for 17 years, and New Hampshire is home. I've been at UNH for all of those 17 years. I started there as a dean back in 2007, and happily built DePaul College. Raised $50 million. It is the only academic building ever built at UNH with no state money. It's a big project. I know how to get things done. I've been involved in 3 small businesses, 2 inns and a hotel. The Hotel Portsmouth is one of those in the city of Portsmouth. And I'm involved in some restaurants presently. I understand what small businesses go through and what small business owners go through. And I understand the tax that we put on our businesses here, the business profits tax in particular, which is really a tax on the income of a business owner. And when I listen to my opponent talk about taxes, or property taxes, and then alternative revenue sources, I wonder, what are those alternative revenue sources? What could those be? Must be a tax of some sort, but we don't know. We just know we want something more equitable than property tax. That's nice, and I'd be interested in chatting about it, Stu, so I can figure that out, because I don't know. But you'll find today that you'll agree with me on 9 out of every 10 issues, which is really interesting. But we disagree on a few. We disagree that the border is an issue that will impact New Hampshire. We already see that impact with fentanyl. We know that 19,000 people came across the Swanton sector this year, more than the last 16 years combined. And we don't know where they are or who they are. It's a problem that is hitting New Hampshire. We also disagree on biological males playing girls' sports. I don't think that's right. My opponent does. So there are some differences there, and they're significant. But look, you know who I am, you know my votes, you know my background, and you know that I'm here for you. You're my constituents, and I work for you. The $100 doesn't go far, $69 after taxes. But, you know, it's a rewarding job, and we do this because we want to do it, and it's a great thing to do. So you can find me, you can contact me anytime, always happy to be there. Are you waving yet or no?
I'm about ready to go.
Okay,
Yep.
well then I'm gonna end it there. We'll have a lot more opportunity to talk about issues, but thanks again for being here on this beautiful day. I didn't think anyone would show up, because I'm driving up thinking, man, I want to go out in the woods. So anyhow, we'll have fun. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Alvin C. I'm a current state representative, finishing my first term. My district is what's called a flotorial, in that it covers 8 different towns, which includes Webster. What happens is the 5 towns that make up District 5 have a population good enough for at least 2 representatives, but not quite 3. The town of Bosquen has enough for 1 representative, but not quite 2. And Loudon and Canterbury have enough for 2 representatives, but not quite 3. So mine's divided up amongst them to make the population numbers come out. I am in favor, and I support the Constitution. I want to make sure that everything we do follows the Constitution, because that is the contract with the people of what's allowed for the government to do. I am very interested in the cost of education, and I do know that there's a couple of court cases involved right now, and depending on what they come up with, and who knows what they'll, their terms will be, the legislature is probably going to have to deal with that in part of the formula. So I can't give you any concrete answers right now. I do know property taxes are high, but other taxes would be needed if we don't do that. The property taxes are somewhat apportioned to the value of the property, so if you don't have a very valuable property, you don't pay as much. But that's all in the eye of the beholder, I realize that. I am in favor of keeping the abortion requirements legislation that we have right now, which allows unlimited choice up to 6 months. And after that, there are still exceptions if the health of the mother or the some fetal anomaly indicates that there should be an abortion, that is allowed. So, you know, the first 6 months, make up your mind early. And I'll wrap it up right there before I get waved off. And I'll be glad to answer questions as they come up. Thank you.
Okay. So, I'm Lorna Carlisle, and I grew up in Webster, and some of you probably know me. Anyway, spent most of my life in New Hampshire. I've lived in a couple other states, but did not like them. So I had a large family, and I learned the value of hard work by growing vegetables, cutting wood, raising chickens, pigs, and a family cow. My first job was picking drops at a local apple orchard. Sorry, not the Frost one. But I made a lot of money. Anyway, attended Merrimack Valley High School. In addition to a career in sales, my husband and I had a small farm stand that we ran for 17 years. I've served as secretary to the Salisbury Friends of the Library and also the Community Power Committee. I'm on the Budget Committee. I'm a mom and also helped my mother in her later years so she could remain in her home. I understand the needs of the middle and lower income people. I strongly support public education and the hardworking teachers and staff. It's essential to provide quality education so that each student can succeed in life. It's the great equalizer. Businesses need qualified workers. The state needs to pay their fair share to support schools. rather than downshift those costs to property taxpayers. Vouchers are draining our resources and gutting public schools. Property tax relief is one of my main goals. We also need affordable housing. The state's economy thrives when we retain teachers, librarians, police, and other essential workers in our local communities. I want the freedom to breathe clean air, drink clean water, enjoy our natural beauty, and make medical decisions free from politicians' whims. I'm an outdoor enthusiast who loves New Hampshire. If elected, my priorities will be protect our environment, reduce property taxes, and get out of people's bedrooms. The one thing that brings us all together is the right to vote. Let's not make people jump through hoops just to exercise that right. Please vote November 5th.
Yes.
Thank you, all. And thank you for putting up with the silliness. You all did well. And so, we have some questions. Some are directed at individuals, and some are directed at no one in particular, but I'm going to direct them where I think to the office. And then you can answer from there. So the first one, running for state rep, senator, and I would include the executive council as well. So I'll read them, and we'll go this way, and then the next question will go that way. Is that fair?
Sure.
All right.
How many minutes?
Not long.
Okay.
As you can tell, 5 minutes is a sliding scale with me.
All right. Maybe 2?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
So here's the first question. As the state that commonly runs the surplus in revenues while having the second least tax burden to residents in the country, including property, income, sales, and similar taxes, and Webster being a town that has consistently stayed below the state average, we all still complain about taxes. How do you plan to keep this national advantage that we have as New Hampshire, or do you think it should change?
Well, okay, I think that's a good question, and first of all, I saw my mother as she aged, and I watched her bank account dwindle as she's on a fixed income and her property taxes kept going up. I feel that by reducing the room and meals tax, which a portion comes back to the town, is not a good idea. It's downshifting again. Business profits tax, the interest and dividends tax, it's mostly helping rich people. The average day-to-day worker needs relief from property taxes. I know myself, I just retired, and I'm already trying to figure out that's going to keep going up, and it's not going to keep in line with my income. But we have to support the schools, and I think we just have wrong priorities. The education is how people are going to get ahead in life, and it's our future. It's how we're going to keep the state going. We're just becoming, we're going to be a desert for education.
Thank you. For the ability to keep a rainy day fund, we need to keep expenses as low as possible for the state. And, that comes from not spending on programs that we don't actually need or that are too big for what they're really good for. I realize that everybody wants more of something from somebody else, because that's the only way you get it is from somebody else. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. One thing I left out of my opening statement, because I was afraid of the wave, was that I have a farm in Bradford. It's 153 acres. We're raising Wagyu. A year ago, we had 3 head. We're now up to 25. We've had 7 births in the last couple of months. My property taxes are outrageous. I may be the highest property taxpayer in the town of Bradford. I understand, trust me. And they went up last year because we voted some things through at the town meeting, and it was a shock, honestly. They've slid back down. But look, it is a problem, and it does hit property owners, particularly when you retire. And that's one reason I think the interest and dividends tax cut is so important, because we're taxing the retirement funds of a lot of our senior citizens, and we're taxing it as if it's income. I had to pay it a little bit this year. I didn't receive that money. It was just added to my account, but I still have to pay the state that tax. The business profits tax, there was an allusion to business owners being rich. I don't think so, particularly in this district. You look around our small towns, they're not rich business owners there. Walk down through downtown Franklin and tell me those business owners are rich and can somehow afford to pay more. Our job is to run government as efficiently as we can, and the same is true for our schools. School administrative costs have gone up 92% in the last 25 years. The cost for teachers, 10%. So where's the money going? Let's start asking these hard questions. Where's the money going? What are we getting for it? And let's hold the schools accountable, as well as every operating entity in our state. I think we've done a good job of that. We've managed the budget well. Surplus this year, I'm betting not. Revenues are pretty soft right now, but we'll continue to work hard, sharpen our pencil, and get it done.
Officer Cassidy, I think we're going to skip you unless you want to have, I don't know why you would. Mr. Green.
Yeah, sure. So I find it fascinating that we've been under Republican leadership effectively in control of the State House for the last 8 years. Property taxes have been going up, but we're advertising this low tax advantage for New Hampshire. And I'll tell you what, I'm in touch with this district. Not only am I from here, but I've been knocking on so many doors. And like I said on WMUR, nobody I talk to feels like we live in a low tax advantage state. And you can say that by the absolute numbers, sure, we have lower taxes than many other states, but it is relative to the economy and it is relative to the power of the individuals living in that area to be able to purchase things. I can't tell you how many people that I've met that are elderly, that can no longer live in their own homes, that have had to move in with their kids because of property taxes. They're on fixed incomes. And I can't tell you that they are being helped out by the massive impending cuts we've got to the interest and dividends tax. And it's true, I agree with my opponent, that many of these people are benefiting from retirement portfolios. I totally understand that. But here's the reality. That cut is a huge favor to the 1% or the 2.5% that are responsible for somewhere between 50 and 70% of the revenues for that tax. Okay? We're not talking about the people that are truly on the knife's edge here. We have to stop the blood loss. That's what I was talking about before. These cuts aren't helping us. Most of the worst damage hasn't even happened yet. It's happening next year, and you think it's bad now. Wait to see what happens when for 1 more, 2 more, 3 more years, 4 more years, more of the same happens. How many more people are going to get kicked out of their houses? I'm sorry, but this whole low tax thing, it's like, and here I am as a Democrat arguing that we should be lowering taxes for the 99% of us. And the other side, in my humble opinion, is feeding everybody a crap sandwich and telling them that it's healthy for them. I don't buy it.
Ms. Hill.
You know, the Republicans are great at taking credit for lowering taxes. The interest and dividends tax, the business profits tax. What they fail to do is take credit for the incredibly high property taxes that we pay at the local level. New Hampshire is last in the nation for the state to fund public education. This is appalling. That means when the state does not provide the funding that is demanded, that is required by our state constitution, when the state does not fairly fund a public education across the board in New Hampshire, that means that local property taxpayers have to pick up the bill. And we know that pain. Someone could say we might have the lowest tax burden in the country. We know that that is not true because we pay those checks. And I am tired of hearing that this is some kind of advantage. I don't think so. We know that Republicans have caused our taxes at the local level to increase, and they are not going down. As a 20-year city councilor, I know that when the state does not address homelessness It means that we at the local level have to do it. In the city of Lebanon, we had to build a homeless shelter because the state is not dealing with homelessness. When the state does not pay for the portion of retirement that they promised to pay for our firefighters, our police, and our teachers, that means that local property taxpayers have to pick up the bill. So let's call a spade a spade. The Republicans are the ones who are raising our taxes, and you know what they say? Every accusation is a confession. So every time you see those signs, Joyce Craig, higher taxes, Stu Green, higher taxes, we know that's not the real story. So keep that in mind in November. If you want to see the voucher program that is taking public tax dollars out of public schools, if you want to see that repealed, and you want to see those tax dollars go back to public schools where they belong, vote for Democrats up and down the ballot in November.
Well, I don't know quite how to follow that, because a lot of my points are her points. But I should point out that it's questionable what's more difficult, talking about taxes in New Hampshire or talking about sex to your kids. You know, it's like one of those things that's just like, oh my God, what do we do here? Our advantage, of course, is the fact that we don't have an income or a sales tax. And I know certainly the businesses in the southern tier thrive on that, the people who come across the borders, and they benefit. But how much of that benefit trickles up through to us in the middle parts of the state, or the people above the notches in many cases? Aaron's point about ending the downsizing is really important. I'm very grateful for my education, my teacher's pension, but the state downshifted it back in 2010 after the economic crisis happened, and all the people of Hudson had to pay more taxes for my benefit. I'm grateful, but it's a broken promise that we need to work about. The big thing about property tax, and I think we've alluded to this, but let's make it clear, it's not based on your ability to pay it. If you can't pay it, you run the risk of having to lose your property. And, you know, that's a crime. We value our homes, so much of our income goes to our homes. There are other forms of taxation, certainly repealing the repeals, bringing, keeping the interest and dividends tax. That usually affects the higher income people. Raising the room and meals tax. How many of you were stuck in traffic this last weekend? For all of those people coming up here, yes, my bill at Common Man would go up a little bit, but a lot of that will be borne by out-of-staters, and we pride ourselves about how we get out-of-staters to pay our bills for us. So let's keep working with that a little bit. But I think one of the biggest things is if the Conville case, Senator Ennis mentioned, if that does go through, we're looking at the state's adequate income, adequate contribution doubling. Where's that going to come from? We need to have the classic adult conversation about how are we going to be dealing with this, because we are looking at a crisis coming down the road to us. We can say we have this advantage, or we can go belly up. We need to talk about things and talk about them without running and hiding if we mention certain words.
I can't see your card, ma'am. Can you tell me your name again? I can't.
Kim Strathby. Strath is the River Valley, D is the River Dee in Scotland.
Been there. You can speak.
I'm just gonna keep mine again short and sweet, and then we'll let you move, and I'll start a new question for you. I just will commit myself to remaining, to being a Mel Thompson Republican and keeping all of our taxes low in every way we can. And I too have been a homeowner and understand how we bear the burden, how homeowners do bear the burden of education. I also believe that students do need choice in their education. I think public education is super important because it provides socialization skills and whatnot, but not all students are meant for public education. So we do have to keep an open mind on that. All students can learn, not all teachers can teach. So we have to be cognizant of the students themselves.
Okay, I have another question. And this is all local stuff. This is all New Hampshire stuff. I have a question here, another one, that deals with the national stage. And it's pretty much a yes or no question. And so it doesn't take a whole lot of explanation. And I'll start with you, Ms. Stratton?
Stratton, yes.
Yep. This says, again, not mine. All candidates, will you please ask all candidates to affirm that Joe Biden won the election in 2020?
He's occupying the White House, is he not?
Is that a yes?
He
That's
won
a
the
yes or no
election.
question?
He's in the White House. I believe in our democratic process.
So that's a yes.
It's a yes.
I don't know why that's so hard for people to say yes or no. Yes or no? And I would say that to anybody up here, not just you. Yes or no? He won, yes.
That's a yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Hell yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we're paying for it.
Yes.
Okay. Got that one. That's probably the only really,
I said yes.
he said yes. Yeah, they've all said yes.
It was unanimous. How remarkable.
Check that one. Okay, back to the, I just wanted to get the sheriff candidates to say something. I'm sorry, because this goes back to the same format as the first question, and we'll start down at your end. And it's a long question, so bear with me. I'm gonna try. We are the live free or die state, so it goes without question that we expect our freedoms and rights to be maintained. While we definitely don't want to be other states, some of them have shown us large issues around the right to privacy, the right to control who may profit from our data without our consent, the right not to be tracked by camera systems without a warrant, the right to repair, often centered around technology, farm equipment, and cars. Would you support or even sponsor legislation to protect these rights in New Hampshire?
Can you like rephrase that a little bit? That was a lot to digest.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna read it again, because it's not my question. I guess what we're saying, rights, depending on what side of the table you sit on, certain rights are in challenge, and other sides say other rights are being challenged. What would you do to protect rights of citizens in the state of New Hampshire? That's the best I'm gonna get with that question. Is that all right?
Specifically around privacy rights, I think?
Privacy rights, I think data rights are really important given what's going on, right?
Data rights are
I think
scary.
we're way behind that one, that scared me. Cameras tracking us without warrants.
Yeah.
All those kind of, it's a broad
Well, we
question.
are the live free or die state. We shouldn't, I mean, I know there's video surveillance everywhere we go, but I think cybersecurity is what scares me the most. More so than video surveillance. I think everybody kind of knows that you're on cameras everywhere. Game cameras, this, that, and the other thing. Perhaps that's a deterrent, you know? You shouldn't fear cameras if you're not doing something wrong. Maybe the sheriffs will, be able to address that a little better, but for the most part, I'm very pro-personal liberty,
Mr. Croft, do you?
Yeah, I do, thank you. So, there's a different group of folks up here, obviously. There's the legislative branch, and there's 4 of us here for the executive branch. I obviously fall under the executive branch. It's my job not to make legislation. It's my job to enforce RSAs. So, whatever's on the books as a law, it's my job to enforce that. And that would be my position. I enforce the laws of the state of New Hampshire.
Oh, okay, sorry. It looks like there's a little, like everything else, it's complicated. The question was complicated, the answer has to be complicated as well. You have a tension between two kind of ideas, two traditional values here in our state. We're a state that really values individual freedom and self-reliance. We do call ourselves the live free or die state. We all like to be able to do things, make our own decisions, and I kind of like to think about myself as being self-reliant in the things that I do in our home. There's also our community values. of what we do for a community to work together to help each other out. And sometimes those things are in tension. We see there's a movement called the Free State Movement, which really emphasizes unlimited personal freedom. But there has to be a counter to that. You can't have all unlimited freedom, because that means I can drive over your rose beds or dump my garbage in your backyard or whatever. So there needs to be a balance. Now, in terms of cybersecurity, I mean, we don't want to be like China, where you see people walking down the streets and everybody is being photographed all the time. Even in liberal states like Britain, you're seeing people recorded all the time. That needs to be under control. But on the other hand, again, in balance, that's how we caught the Boston bombers. Because they were picked up on surveillance cameras right outside stores, and that helped end that piece there. So I want to have people to have as much individual freedom as possible, particularly in their personal autonomy. But we need to be aware of public safety and try to balance that out.
New Hampshire is the live free or die state. The right to privacy is a fundamental right. One of the most concerning parts of the overturning of Roe v. Wade was the challenge to this right to privacy that had been previously found in the US Constitution. One of the reasons that I pointed out it is so important that we have Joyce Craig as our next governor, because she will nominate justices to the New Hampshire Supreme Court who believe in the right to privacy in our state constitution, so that we can make sure that the right to privacy is recognized and protected here in New Hampshire. And as an executive counselor, I will make sure that the nominations to our judicial branch, to all of the courts, our district courts, superior courts, the Supreme Court, are asked about their position about the right to privacy and where it falls in our state constitution, because this is incredibly important for all of the reasons asked in the question, stated in the question. I want to also point out that I think it is ridiculous that a woman should have to ask anyone for permission for what they do with their body. The right to privacy also is about bodily autonomy. And I believe that also the right to the freedom of self-expression is another right that is on the line that we must protect here in New Hampshire. And I have been proud to fight back against the horrible anti-trans legislation in the New Hampshire House, including banning gender-affirming care, and I am appalled that the Republicans are literally going to children's sports games and using that as a way to protest and bully children on the soccer field. It's happening in towns right around here, to your neighbors, to our friends. The Republicans in New Hampshire have literally spent the last 4 years waging war against 5 children who want to play sports with their friends. This is wrong. I will spend the rest of my life, as the mother of a trans kid, I will spend the rest of my life advocating for trans kids and for all of us, because the right to self-expression is fundamental. Thank you.
I'm going to take this a completely different direction because the question was so broad and could have covered so many different things. I think we talked about cybersecurity earlier. I'm a career intelligence officer. I know about some of the capabilities that are out there, and there is some scary stuff. The irony is that everybody is most worried about government intrusion on their private lives, but I can tell you from personal experience that at least where I worked, and over that course of time, there was a very strong culture of never invading on the privacy of US persons. And by the way, that can be a citizen, that can be a non-American living in the US, that can be a US company overseas. Like, there are many broad ways to define that. Those capabilities aren't just resident within the government, however. Most of the stuff that is affecting us on a day-to-day basis is in the private sphere. And I'll tell you, even just getting to know how this campaign works, like, it is a very interesting thing to know where some of this data comes from and how it's used. I would absolutely be in favor of putting some restrictions on the ability of these entities that are so hard to nail down to intrude on our private lives, whether we're surfing websites, whether we're driving our cars, which are also being tracked, geofencing cell phones. It's weird to me that my parents have a house out in Arizona, and that I routinely get text messages saying, would you like to sell your house on Sugarloaf Drive in Arizona? How do they know that I was there? They don't know it's my house, but they know that I was there. These are the kinds of things that are actually on the cusp of getting way out of control, and it's snowballing. So yeah, I would be in favor of it. At least as we're just talking about cyber stuff, I'm all on board with rolling that back.
Thank you. Kathy?
You're protecting your constitutional rights, and it should not be violated without reason or court approval.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with Stu. I think he captured it well. The two examples I was going to use were the car and the phone.
Yeah.
I mean, they're grabbing everything. You can't go anywhere, and people know exactly where you are, right? And that's a small one, but the companies are gathering an awful lot of this data. They sell it, they use it. I mean, it's amazing to me. I'll get an email and it says, hey, Dan, you got a good credit score. Do you want a loan? Like, where do they get this information? And they're looking at my credit score apparently all the time. I don't know how that works. To me, that should be fairly private. I ought to be able to lock that down. So if there's something we can do, maybe work with the Attorney General's office and perhaps some legislation that might tighten things up here in our state, I think that'd be beneficial. But it can be really hard to do that when you're a small state, because companies will say, you're too small, we just won't deal with you, right? So we'll have to walk a fine line, but I think we need to do something. Yep.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind people that just a few years ago, we passed a constitutional amendment to protect the rights of personal privacy. That was Article 2B in Part 1. But the problem with cybersecurity, because the internet is connected all over the world, it's not just a local problem. So the only way you can protect yourself is to not use the internet, not use a telephone, and don't deal with any companies that are using the internet. You got a problem there because the town's got computers and it's on the internet. I just got reminded of the fact that a few months ago, I got several letters from insurance companies saying, we see your homeowner's insurance policy is coming up for renewal. We'd like to quote on that. You know, why do they know that my insurance is coming up? So there's almost nothing we can do if we can't catch the people, and the internet is such an open thing for anybody, anywhere in the world, to gather data.
Everybody said everything. Right.
Yeah.
I just laugh when I get in my car though, the maps thing pops up and it knows where I'm going. Even down to the day of the week, it knows where I'm going. So, and when I was working in sales, I called on a lot of different companies that have a lot of capabilities. The genie is kind of out of the bottle. It's really hard, it's complex. I think Live Free or Die is great, but you know, it's gonna be a real complex problem. If they could come up with something, I would definitely vote for it if it would not impinge on people's personal rights.
Was it Mencken who said, for every complex problem, there's an easily found answer, and it's always wrong? This next question was for one candidate, but I'm gonna change that. I'm gonna ask all of you. And if you don't want to answer it, I get it, okay? But it's on the abortion issue. Obviously, that's a big issue. And it's a chance for you all to state your opinion if you haven't stated it yet. But there's an ad on TV, unfortunately I watch, where a candidate says that the new abortion law is settled law. So I'm going to ask you all, did you not think Roe v. Wade was settled law? And how do you define health care after 6 months? Who decides that health care happens? And that goes to the question, okay, who gets to choose or who gets to decide what is proper health care after that 6 month timeline goes? Is it the doctor? Or is it some other board? Or how does that decision get made after the 6 month? Because that seems to be the problem in some places where they don't know what the rules are. So I guess I'd like to go down this way. Was, in your mind, Roe v. Wade settled? Before it was unsettled. Is the new law settled? And who makes the decision for the case after 6 months? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You got that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I feel like Roe v. Wade was the right decision and it shouldn't have been overturned. And I'd like to give one personal example of somebody that I know that had a child that was going to be born without a brainstem cell. So it was going to die. They should have had the choice if they wanted to abort that child anytime, because that child was not viable. It's not like they couldn't wait to get rid of the child. When the child was born, some people are now saying they withheld care. No, they allowed that child to bond with the parents because the child was going to die. That is a personal decision between a husband and wife, and it's their family and their choice. It's not anything that should be involved a politician.
Okay, the thing about the 6 months is there's a generally accepted medical definition of when pregnancy begins, and so it would be from that point. I'm pro-life. I wish there wasn't a need for abortions ever, and a lot of the cases that I've heard of, and I know that I don't know them to be actual facts, so some of it's anecdotal, but they were done for convenience rather than because there was a health issue either for the baby or for the mother.
I just want to, the question wasn't how to define the 6 months, it was who makes the decision after 6 months for the health. That was what I was wondering.
That would be medical professionals.
Medical professionals, okay.
What I'm about to say may not be popular reading the room, but Roe v. Wade, Dobbs overturning that was consistent with the Constitution, and even Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote that before she passed. I think she would have voted with the majority on that particular ruling. I'm pretty well convinced. But look, after at the 7th, 8th, and 9th month of pregnancy, the decision is between a woman and her doctor. It's that simple.
Is that codified that way?
It is, and it should be that way. It's how it ought to be. And up until then, everything's, yeah.
Was that not Roe v. Wade in the first place? It's just who decided it, right?
Well, you know, and our law in New Hampshire is less restrictive than California, which is viability, which is now 20 to 22 weeks. We're at 24. And about 40 other states have a similar law to ours, and Massachusetts is almost identical. So I think we're in a pretty good spot.
For now.
Well, that goes back to my questions about the
I would say we haven't changed it, and we won't. And I'm committed to leaving it as it is. I think it's a good law.
Good. Mr. Green?
Yeah, okay, a couple of things. Yeah, I thought it was settled. I think that was the first one. But now that can of worms has been opened, so precedent can be rolled back anywhere, which, you know, I can see both arguments, but it was settled before in my mind. The problem with New Hampshire's law after the 6 months is that that judgment call is, as my opponent said, between the parents and the doctors, but the doctors are under threat of criminal prosecution if they get that call wrong. And New Hampshire is an outlier in that regard. And my opponent has supported that legislation, sponsored some of it. We are consistent with Maine, but inconsistent with all other New England states and New York. So regionally, we're way out of step. The other thing is that it's not secure, even below 6 months. We haven't protected abortion. We've only not outlawed it yet. So we need to do more proactive, take more proactive measures to ensure that it's not so easy to just turn it off like that. And we're seeing those proposals made on a routine basis now. 15 weeks, you know, I know it wasn't widely supported, but this is a foot in the door, toe in the water kind of slippery slope scenario. And did I miss any other question, or was?
Well, I'm concerned about who makes the decision. Well, the decision after the 6 month period.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, right now, it would appear that it's between the family and the doctor, but of course, they're doing that under the threat of, you know, if you get it wrong, you're going to jail. And we're talking about a $100,000 fine and 7 years in jail. That's what we're looking at here. And so that's a chilling effect, right? Yeah, I know I had another thought, I lost it, but I'm sure that Karen will pick it up.
Personal private healthcare decisions are personal private healthcare decisions, period, end of story. And let's be clear, in New Hampshire, the abortion ban that was passed by Republicans 4 years ago was a ban, a complete ban after 6 months that had no exceptions for rape, no exceptions for incest, no exceptions for fatal fetal anomalies, and criminalized doctors who were providing life-saving health care to women facing tragic conditions. That is what they voted for. And so we have to know. And then after that, when the Democrats were the ones who actually made sure that there was going to be an exception for fatal fetal anomalies, when the Democrats made sure that doctors would not be criminally prosecuted, thank you, Democrats, Republicans in the New Hampshire House introduced 15-week abortion bans. We see what their agenda is. They're not going to stop at 6 months. They want to roll it back to 15 weeks. There was even a 15-day abortion ban introduced in the New Hampshire House. 15 days. No one even knows they're pregnant at 15 days. Give me a break. The extreme anti-abortion agenda that we see nationally is here in New Hampshire, in the State House. But in New Hampshire, it's not just in the State House, it's also in the Executive Council. And Republicans on the Executive Council who used to vote for family planning contracts which provide contraception, sexual STI testing, cancer screening prevention, like the cancer that my mother died from, they used to fund those family planning programs. No problem. It was a nonpartisan issue because healthcare should be a nonpartisan issue. But as the extreme anti-abortion agenda has infiltrated into our state legislatures and in New Hampshire, this additional branch that we have, the Executive Council, they have now made the family planning contracts partisan, and the Republicans have been defunding Planned Parenthood and the other family planning centers as another way to prevent people from accessing abortion. That is exactly what the agenda is. We cannot believe them when they say, we'll leave it as it is. No. In fact, we need to elect Democrats who are going to pass proactive laws to protect the right to abortion and the right to privacy here in New Hampshire. Thank you.
Once again, I'm following Karen, and a lot of my points certainly are her points, but I will certainly say I supported Roe v. Wade. I think they got it right in the first place, and I believe it was settled law, and even Justice Kavanaugh said so during his confirmation hearing, so of course then he helped to unsettle it and everything. I really believe that it should be a given for the first 6 months, and then it should be between the parents and the doctors should not feel prosecution. We are seeing what's happened in other states, Florida, Alabama, Texas, where women are denied health care when they're miscarrying because the doctors are terrified of going to jail for producing abortions. I mean, that's absolutely wrong. And very frankly, the whole way that New Hampshire passed its new abortion law was a travesty. It couldn't get through the legislative process, so it was attached to the budget. And Governor Sununu was very happy to veto the Democrat-sponsored budget earlier, but he wouldn't touch or veto the Republican one, even though he said he was pro-choice. So I think it's really, let's protect it. Let's make it clear that this is a human right. This is a woman's bodily autonomy. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I can't do with mine. Why should that be different for women?
Yes. Let me say that, first of all, it's my least favorite topic. However, women's health care freedom is so important. I do not believe Roe v. Wade should have been overturned. I did feel it was the law of the land. I feel we should continue to support contracts for family planning and services, for all of that, because even as a young girl, I needed services. I didn't have insurance. Without that, I wouldn't have been having pap smears and breast exams and all of these things that are so important, especially for young women to, you know, before they even really know themselves very well in their bodies. These services are so important. And that's pretty much where I'll leave it. I will not, you know, turn down contracts.
You had your hand up. Mr. Fanning, you have a question?
Yes. First, thank you for being here and on the firing line.
Not literally.
Okay, I'm gonna go to the other end of the spectrum. I believe Maine and Vermont have a law for you to pass with dignity. Example, if I had a terminal illness, it gets to the point where I want to pass and so forth. I think the legislature last year, or this past year, had a bill and it failed. What I would like to know, individually, because I know the police, they have to clean up the mess, okay? I would rather pass with dignity than take a 357 and do away with myself, okay? If it's a standalone bill, because I know a lot of people pop out, well, this was added to it, I can't vote for that. So they will not, how can I phrase it, really vote for the bill. If there was a standalone bill to pass with dignity, how would you vote on a subject like that? For or against? If you're against, the reason why.
I'm looking at Paula, she probably doesn't care which way.
No life insurance.
That and coming this way.
I'm not even gonna touch that one. Sorry.
Okay, if the police would like.
I would, thank you, Mr. Fanjoy. So obviously, not being the legislative branch, I have no control over what bill gets introduced or passed.
You get the
But,
best.
but this is what I always say all the time, why can we put our pets down? And I watch a mother of 14 years being in the Merrimack County nursing home from the neck up, not knowing who I am. I go to visit her for 5 minutes, 2 or 3 times a week, and she doesn't even know I'm there. And obviously, that decision is somebody of greater power than us, but it's horrible. It's horrible, horrible, horrible. My 14-year-old dog, I can put, God rest her soul, I can put her down, but I have to watch my mother go through this horror. So, again, not being in the legislative branch, but certainly in support of a bill like that.
But where is the line?
Well, I think Vermont statute, if I'm
Where
correct,
is the
has,
deadline?
you have to have three physicians determine that you are in fact terminal. And obviously that makes sense, right? So it wasn't just gonna be you as an individual say, shoot me, I wanna die. It has to be determined by medical personnel.
I think we can debate the how. The question is, are you okay with the whole premise? Is that-
I am, yeah.
That's what I heard.
I am too. I believe that, I just can't imagine people spending their lives in agony for, months, years. There's no reason to suffer like that. That's their wish, and again, I think the Vermont laws seem to be well-written, that I would totally support that.
Last year, I testified in favor of that Death with Dignity bill in the New Hampshire House and heard the testimony from many people, the heart-wrenching testimony of the agony just that people are facing. I think that the law that has been proposed in New Hampshire in the past, and I understand will be reintroduced in the future, has safeguards to make sure that people are competent to make the decisions, that there are medical, that there are doctors who are involved. So I think that with the right safeguards, that kind of legislation is consistent with the values here in New Hampshire of live free or die. So as an executive counselor, I would not get to vote on that kind of legislation, but as a citizen and as a leader, I can use my voice to advocate for that.
I had a friend who was a logger, and I really looked up to him. He was super strong. Personality-wise, he was bright. And he found out he had ALS, and we lost him, and it took a long time. And I don't know what decision he would have made, but he didn't have that choice. He didn't have that option. It was very painful to lose him. And I still mow his widow's field every fall, just to remember. And like I said, I don't know what decision he would have made, but I wish he had the ability to choose one way or the other, because I know that he hated the pain that he was going through, especially over that long duration. So yeah, I would support that legislation.
I'm sure we've all experienced something similar. I know I have with my parents. Without question, I would agree with that. With safeguards in place, it's a horrible way to suffer and go like that.
This is a tough one, and I walked into the Senate chamber that morning thinking I was going to vote yes, and I voted no. And I think maybe I wasn't quite ready to wrap my head around it. We lost my sister-in-law to metastatic breast cancer at age 53, probably 6 months after that vote. And I had talked with her and my brother about it at length, and I don't think they would have taken advantage of it if it were available in Ohio where they live. But that morning, I just didn't quite feel I was ready. And there was one more data point that did it for me. I talked to so many people, and I got lots of calls from constituents. And my department chair at UNH, I'm no longer dean, I'm on the faculty, so now I have a boss again. He's from Germany. And I asked him, Marcus, you guys are doing this over there, what do you think? And he says, don't do it. And he says, what's happening in the Netherlands right now is terrible. People get clinically depressed and they can find a doctor who will order the assisted suicide. So he said, don't do it. It won't go the way you think it will. I'm still torn. And I can't tell you right now if it comes up next year how I'll vote. But I'll listen to what you have to say and I'll think about it hard again. It's a tough decision. I'm a man of faith and that impacted my vote as well.
I voted against the bill, and there were some definite complications in that bill, so the bill itself was not ready for me to vote for. I would have a hard time finding safeguards that I could truly trust to really do the right thing. Here's stories from Canada where they have single source medical care, and sometimes you break your leg, you may need surgery, you may be able to get it in 6 to 10 weeks or something like that. But there have been anecdotal evidence, indications and stories that those people were offered euthanasia next week rather than wait for the surgery. So that's what I'm fearful of. And bear in mind, most of our doctors are controlled by the federal government through the medical profession. So it's not a true medical decision.
So I'll try to be quick. So first of all, I think it is a personal choice, and you're going to get a doctor that should be the profession of what your illness is. You can't just say, oh, I'm depressed, and you're not going to get a doctor that's going to certify, yeah, let's go with it. You have to have a terminal illness, no chance of recovery, and it should be, again, your personal choice. We're not making it for other people. we're making it for ourselves. And that, to me, what live free or die means. Freedom to make choices for my own self.
Is that a follow-up to this stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question for Mr. Sees. I want to know where you got that information on Canadians. It sounds like some conspiracy theory you picked up on the web for me.
Well, the anecdotal.
So where did you get that
the anecdotal
information?
I will have to say that I did get it from the internet, from a source that I trust.
And what source is that?
I don't remember which site it was, but there are several sites that I trust.
Did you question that at all on fact check? Did you question that at all on?
No, I did not.
Thank
But
you.
the point that I was trying to make is that even in the United States, the doctors are strongly controlled by the federal government.
Oh, that's not
That's
true.
politicians.
Nope.
That's not true.
No, let's not argue, come on, don't be silly. He said his thing. Okay, we've ignored the sheriff.
Under penalty of law.
I do have a question that goes back to the opening statement, and I apologize if you can remember. And it's, I'm going to direct it to Mr. Croft, and then you can respond, okay? And it goes back to your statement. What is your comment, Mr. Croft, on Mr. Cassidy's statement on drugs in the very beginning? And then I'll let you respond.
Thank you.
Yep.
Folks, there's a lot of things that my office does. Drugs happen to be one of them. When Frank worked for me, he was on the drug task force, as he alluded to. He resigned. I had another person on the drug task force as well, who also resigned. I have met personally with the Attorney General, who is the overseer of the drug task force. They are currently in the process of revamping the task force, and I'm waiting for that to happen. In the meantime, I work closely with NIU, which is the Narcotics Investigation Unit with the state police. I have a deputy assigned to the U.S. Marshal's Office. We are getting so much benefit having that individual over there, not only in drugs, but in warrant apprehension. At some point in time, I will look back at DTF and put somebody there, but they're not there yet. I didn't see the results in the 4 years that I've been sheriff of anything out of DTF. I spoke with two of the leaders, both of who are Frank's supervisors, asking for results in Merrimack County. I didn't need to know names, but even though the position is grant funded, it's not 100% grant funded. So I have people I have to answer to when it comes to budget. And if I didn't have numbers to support the need to have somebody there, it wasn't working for me. So I've taken a hiatus with that. I speak weekly with the director of the DEA. Great friend of mine, lives in Bow, came here from Connecticut. We work really closely. We share intelligence. I got him involved with the county jail. The amount of folks that talk on the phone when they know they're being recorded and give up information just blows my mind. But now that connection is there, and the DEA is actually, we have federal inmates there now, so we have some big players there now. But we've really got a lot of good cases out of there with the intelligence we've been able to get. So I am strong on drugs. You know, my opponents alluded to the fact that I'm weak because I was on the diversion. But you know what? Everybody makes a mistake in life. And I learned firsthand, if these are low-level offenses, and if I can bring somebody and rehabilitate that individual and make them a law-abiding, tax-paying, working individual, we all benefit, guys. Because if I don't do that, then they're going to just continue to reoffend. I'm not weak on crime. I'm active in every one of my communities. You can talk to any one of my chiefs. You know, 17 of the 27 or 26 police chiefs in this county have endorsed me. I'm not a weak on crime. And his accusations that I am, they're not true. And I think most of you here know me better than that. So I've probably used my 5 minutes.
My phone is gone.
Thank you.
Mr. Cassidy, you have a chance to respond.
First off, as far as diversion goes, I have no problems with diversion. Especially if you're a user, whatever gets you there, I believe in getting the help. If you're a first time, absolutely, let's give you a bite at the apple. Whether it be drug court, whether it be some sort of rehab, I'm all for diversion to avoid that criminal record. However, the problem I saw when I was doing, and even when he was ran diversion, and many times I was working security for his diversion, I'd have people coming in with cocaine on their possession, or they'd come in intoxicated, which he's aware of because I called him up as a diversion, head of the diversion. People, sometimes you can lead them to the water, but they're not gonna take the water, and they're not gonna feed. So I believe in it being kind of like progressive discipline with your employer or how you raise your kids. I'm gonna give you the chance the first time around, but if it continues, we have to take different steps or it's not gonna stop. You have the drug courts. Many times I'd arrest somebody, the courts, and that's not my call. I'd put my input in with the county attorney, but they'd end up in the drug courts. While they're in the drug courts, as an undercover officer, I'd be investigating them a month later, again, for committing more seals, while they're supposed to be in the drug court. At what point do you say this isn't working? Now it's time to treat you like an adult, and you're gonna pay the consequences. So I'm not against diversion, but there is a progressive discipline to it, if you will. If you're not taking opportunity or taking advantage of the choices given to you, then we have to take different steps and you have to be held accountable. Otherwise, you and your families are paying. We are paying. As far as drug task force, first he says it's because of restructure, and then he says it's because he didn't see production coming from there. Well, apparently he and I were working for two different states or counties. After I retired, I still got called back to the task force for two very large cases we did right here in Merrimack County. One of them led into Rhode Island, which had ties going over into Mexico. The man was out on probation, parole, for murder and drug sales prior, and we got him again for enterprise. He was dealing pounds of meth, not ounces, he was dealing pounds. We were able to arrest him and a lot of conspirators. Involved many small towns here in Merrimack County, but it went to Vermont, went to Rhode Island, and like I said, from there went to Mexico. We did a case right here up the road in Webster, which the Webster police can tell you because we involved them with it. Another one, dealing pounds of meth, right here in Webster that we did. And this was all under the sheriff's tenure. As far as the restructure, I have spoken with the drug task force. There is no restructure. They're still operating, and the drug task force gives you a grant. So by having me on there, they pay a grant. It pays the majority of the cost that the county has going into me as an employee. But they provide the equipment, they provide the vehicle, they provide the undercover money that we need to buy the drugs. So that's not coming out of here. That's all grant funded. So it's minimal cost to the county, and in return for giving up the one body, you're getting several in back. The one I referred to where it went out of state, we actually involved DEA, we involved the marshals, we involved FBI Safe Street. By being part of the task force, we were bringing all that talent, if you will, the resource. The restructure, there is no restructure. What happened is, as my opponent has alluded to in the past, there's retention problems, there's recruiting problems, budgets. So the small town of Webster, unfortunately, they can't afford to put somebody on the task force, even though it's grant funded. You can't afford it. Well, many agencies are in the same boat, especially in the western part of the state. They can't bring the officers in because there's not enough money to offer anymore, or nobody wants to do the job. So are you going to protect your streets here with patrol uniforms, or are you going to send somebody to the task force, but now you don't have enough to answer calls and patrol here? That's all that happened there. They shrunk. So instead of being 5 teams, it's now maybe 3 teams that more times than not tend to operate as one. So I'm in Merrimack County, but maybe tomorrow I have to go to Claremont and work some cases in Claremont. It happened before when I was on there when we were full staff. I'd be up in Berlin. I worked as an undercover in a methadone clinic. I'd go in and I'm providing clean urine samples, and they're providing me methadone. This again was under the sheriff's time, which I brought to his attention. Come to find out, they questioned me on why I'm clean. I give them a story, so they upped my dosage of Suboxone. This went on for at least 2 months. And all it came down to is a Medicaid. So the drug issue is huge. It needs to be addressed, and it's not being addressed. I didn't say he's weak. I do fault him for not staying active with the drug fight. Teaching is good, but we need to be on the street stopping this stuff. Fentanyl is a major thing. Meth, it has actually become worse. You can buy meth $100 now through the postal, and it's hard to detect. They've got one postal inspector for the state. Fentanyl is in everything now, everything, even the marijuana we were getting. I'm not a big thing about marijuana, But even the marijuana was laced with fentanyl. That is killing our kids, it's killing our families. It needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Before we give them closing statements, because we need enough time for that closing statement. Are there any other questions out here? We'll get you.
I'm interested in the education funding thing, and I really feel that the voucher program is diverting funds from the public schools that isn't necessarily helpful. In fact, the whole idea of the vouchers, the way it's run in New Hampshire, is there's no accountability for the funds that go to the private schools and well, anyway, if we could address the voucher system, I'd really like some answers.
I kind of didn't hear a question. You want to know their opinion about the voucher system?
Yes.
Okay, quick, voucher system?
Okay, I'll try to be quick. I think that first of all, they give you $5,000. It's not helping poor people because the average cost of a private school is at least $12,000. Where are they gonna come up with an extra $7,000? Where are they gonna get their kids to school? And then there's no accountability. So it's really, again, it's just a benefit for the rich people. And it's gutting the public schools, which to me, fix the problem. We do have some issues at the school, but we gotta fix the problem. And the vouchers is not benefiting New Hampshire.
It's not a voucher system. It is a system of repaying legitimate expenses where you have to provide receipts and everything else for educational purposes, and there's a list of things that are acceptable and things that are not acceptable. The schools still get payment for the student who's not there, and they don't have to teach them, they don't have to feed them, they don't have to do anything with them. So it's not a really bad situation.
So I've spent my entire life in public schools, K-12 and the universities. All have been public. All of my degrees are public schools, and I've only worked at public schools. I value public education. At the same time, when I was a boy, I was poor, as I noted in my opening statement, and there was a Catholic school just up the road when I was in high school, and friends 2 doors down went to that school. And I played with those kids after school, and when I started hearing what they were doing in science and math, I was pretty upset. I'm like, Mom, they're doing this, this, and this. They've got this great lab. I want that. I want to do that. But the answer was no. You can't. We can't afford it. And I was learning under new math. Some of you might remember that crap. It took me until the 3rd year of college to get myself fixed from what they did to me in high school with new math. These things set up an opportunity for kids who aren't learning well in a particular school to find another one. That's phenomenal. And it's an opportunity that we shouldn't deny to people. I think it's a great thing. And I hear a lot about the big drain on the system. Does anybody know what it costs? Anybody know the total school budget? It's $25 million for the EFAs. Total school budget is $3.6 billion. Billion. We can wipe out this program, your property tax will not change, I promise you. I support it.
Yeah, so from the so-called party of fiscal responsibility, we are cutting $150 to $160 million of revenue in interest and dividends this coming year and for all other years. We have lowered business and profits tax, BET. We have lost somewhere between $500 and $750 million over the last 8 years. And now we have this voucher system. And you're right, it's about 25 million bucks. But it is a program that has doubled in cost every year. And we have examples that we can look at. Arizona, Indiana, Florida, all of which are warning us not to do this. Because when you start removing all the caps on who can do it, and by the way, that keeps going up every year because of our friends on the other side of the aisle, it will explode the budget at exactly the time when we are hurting for the most revenue. It makes no sense to me. I don't get it. I do believe that we need a constellation of different schools and programs. I get that. I benefited from that. My kids have gone to public and private schools. we do also have to get this program under control, because if there's one thing that we can afford and pay for, it has to be the public education system. And I'll end with this. I should have started with it. We should also recognize that the whole EFA program was an extreme, underhanded, libertarian attempt to undercut a major public institution because they just don't want to pay taxes. And so this was a system that was supposed to be, and is going down that road, to be built up over time, and you can't sustain both, so you collapse to the other one. And so effectively now what we've got is taxpayer money going to people who, some of whom need it, but over 70% of whom didn't actually need it because they were already sending their kids to private institutions. And oh, by the way, I haven't even gotten to how constitutional it is, which is, by the way, literally in black and white in the New Hampshire Constitution, where it says, no taxpayer money shall be made or used for the religious indoctrination of another, which is what most of this stuff is going towards.
Everything he said, and also public dollars belong in public schools. Furthermore, as an executive counselor, one of our main jobs is to oversee the contracts that are over $10,000 in the state. A significant contract is with the vendor who oversees the voucher scam. Let's call it what it is. It's a scam. And what has just come out in the last couple of months is that there have been serious problems with how the vendor is actually overseeing this program, and that maybe up to a quarter of the people who are receiving vouchers in New Hampshire don't even qualify according to the current law. So we have to make sure, first of all, we have to elect Democrats so that they can repeal the voucher scam. And secondly, we have to make sure that to the degree, if we can't repeal the voucher program, we need to make sure that the vendor who is overseeing that program is complying with New Hampshire law, and that people who do not qualify for those vouchers are not receiving our hard-earned taxpayer dollars. So please, if I haven't made it clear yet, vote for Democrat up and down the ballot in November.
Pick up where Stu.
Well, actually, you're third in line, so let them finish.
So to pick up where Stu was, that's actually from the New Hampshire Constitution, Part 2, Article 83, in case you would like to look things up, which says that no money raised by taxation shall ever be granted or applied for the use of the schools or institutions of any religious sect or denomination. So it is unconstitutional to give money to religious schools, period. If we are sworn to uphold the Constitution, there you go. Secondly, again, the idea was to, offer choice. Choice is good. I love offering to my students choices. The very first year, it was largely taken up by people who, had financial issues. But ever since then, it has gone much, much more to people with the means to be able to afford to send their kids to private schools. There certainly are more options available. There are numerous charter schools throughout the states which are public schools, which offer that without having to divert the money to these other institutions. And again, if you read your Concord Monitor, it was very recently that they were talking about this lack of oversight, the fact that a good portion of this money may have been awarded to people who do not qualify. So if you're going to run a program that's already cost over $50 million, and it's small potatoes compared to the $1 billion that Senator Innes quoted, but it's still money coming from our pockets that needs to be going to keep our public institutions strong. Yes, some public schools are better than others. Frequently, it's because they can't afford to hold on to good teachers, or they're having to bring in new teachers all the time. That's what oftentimes makes a school poor, when you have a bunch of rookies as opposed to a school with a broad spectrum of teachers of various levels of experience.
Well, because of the way that we fund our schools, property-rich towns have more services in their schools, better opportunities in their schools. West Stewartstown cannot build the same school that Portsmouth can. It's just not possible. So this is where the equity needs to be. is how do we make the public schools equitable? So, and as I've said, the funding can't go to people who can afford to send their kids to school. Plain and simple.
Okay, now, ma'am, you had your hand up.
I have a quick question.
Please.
At the beginning of this forum, the candidates were asked, did they accept the results of the 2020 election and that Joe Biden won? And Mr. Innes, you said yes. This is what I got in the mail today. I do not accept the result.
They put a lot of stuff in the mail about me, don't they?
Well, I'm not, that's why I'm giving, that's why I'm asking you.
And I appreciate it. You'll notice that that's only part of what I tweeted, right? Dot, dot, dot at the beginning, dot, dot, dot at the end.
Yeah.
I didn't look up the tweet. I have no idea what I tweeted. My guess is it was probably something like, until I understand some of the irregularities that we're seeing, I won't accept this result. I mean, and all of that was explained, and I accepted it. That's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the question.
Jen?
Yeah. Mine is also directed to Mr. Seas, or not Mr. Seas, Mr. Innes. I watched a Meet the Candidate on WMUR with Adam Sexton between you and retired Commander Stewart.
Yes.
And you were asked a question about the tax, the state property tax.
Yes.
And your answer was only that New Hampshire has the lowest state property tax.
No, that's not what I said.
Per capita.
Yes.
Per capita.
I said
is
we have the
what you
lowest
said.
tax burden per capita,
Per
not property
capita.
tax.
No, you said property. The question was property tax.
I'm pretty sure I remember what I said, but okay. We do have the lowest per capita tax burden in the next, one of the lowest in the nation. That's not necessarily specific to property tax, but let me add this. Vermont and Maine and Massachusetts all have income tax, sales tax, property tax. Their property taxes aren't lower than ours. Check it out. If we add new taxes, I don't think your property taxes will go down.
But we are a
History
different
doesn't show
state.
that.
We are a different state than the ones that you just
Not if we
stated.
put those taxes in place, we won't be. We are the freest state in
Wait
the
a minute.
nation. We need to stay there.
Could you let me,
Well, I think you're in the middle of a discussion. But I would love to leave
And I'm
that.
happy to pick it up after.
Give him time at the end, because I
Yeah,
think
let's
we've
do
all
that.
heard his position.
Meet me in the back.
It's not gonna change.
Yep.
And so you had a question.
Great, thank you. I'm Kent Hackman from Andover, and I'm pleased to have met a fellow from the Midwest, I got to get to know Dan just a little bit, and I look forward to
It's my
getting you
pleasure.
doing better. I have an experience. I've only been here for 15 years in this state, and every time I go to the annual town meeting and taxes are discussed, our property taxes, someone goes to the microphone and says, the reason for our tax burden is it's been downloaded from the state legislature. So, I still don't understand quite what's going on, but I understand that something's not happening right. Now, this is just a general background for the question. For existing legislators, and hopefully future legislators, and executive counselors, what route do you see to improving state revenue? Now, I think I've heard Dan say, I encourage businesses. I think that's a good route, but I don't see it producing the sort of results that my friends in town at the annual meeting are going to find acceptable as costs are downloaded to Andover. I know Stu has ideas and everyone else has ideas. So I'm looking, and I know Elvin has ideas too. So what concrete proposals would I expect to see from any of you in the next legislative session that would address this downloading issue and take care of the needs for the funding, the adequate funding, as it's being debated in the courts right now, the adequate funding for schools everywhere in the state, so they have an adequate budget to hire good teachers and retain them and have good facilities, et cetera, et cetera.
to, I can start, I'm happy to, unless you want us to go down the road.
Well, I think we're gonna be running out of time, so 2 minutes and we'll go down the line, because I wanna hear from everybody.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't want anything that specific down the line, right? So,
Let's start here. So I'll try to be brief, but one of the things is the Constitution said that the taxes should be fair and equitable. If you look at the revenue report, you will find that there are taxes that their portion is $5 and something cents per thousand. Salisbury might be $15 and something per thousand. That's not fair and equitable, and there's rich towns that do not want to pay their fair share. They raise way more money than they need for their own students, and this is for the common good. We need education for everybody, and everybody's got to chip in fairly.
If you look at your property tax, bill, you'll see a list on there of the apportionment of what's in there. Part of it is for the town's municipal operations. Part of it is your school fee. And at your town meeting, you're not voting on what the school's assessing each town. Webster is part of the Merrimack County School District. Andover sends some of their students, the high school students, to Merrimack County. There's an assessment that is voted on at the annual school board meeting, and that's where that funding comes from.
Yes, and that's there because it's not properly funded by the state, my friend. That's my perception. I may be wrong, but that's my perception.
Okay, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the state should be funding all the schools.
Well, the Constitution says an adequate education, and whether that's 5,000 per student or 10,000, I don't know. What I do know is what I repeated, that there's angst at every town meeting, the annual town meeting, about expenses being downloaded on us.
Mr. Hyde, this is gonna take all night, so let's let them go down.
Oh, we got lots of food.
So I'm interested in what...
I appreciate your point, and it's a complex issue, it's not gonna have a quick solution. But I will say, the budget before this last one, we added $250 million to the schools. We added $169 million in this most recent budget, which passed 24-0, I might add. And we added additional funding for school construction and renewal. We've programmed in, and I expect the number to go up, a 31% increase over the next decade in funding for schools. So we're doing what we can. Now, the court may come back and tell us to do something different, in which case we will. It'll be draconian and a wild ride, but we'll do what we're ordered to do if it comes to that. But I think it'd be best if we could solve it on our own. But look, let's say we step back and say, all right, well, then the state's gonna totally fund all education. Would everyone be happy with that? We're gonna totally fund an adequate education. Where would that put us? We don't know, right? So, okay.
Well, where do you think
will
it
it
might-
be
where do
as
you
much
think it
money
might
as
put
you
us?
get now? I don't know. Will it be less? Will it be more? Will it be better? Will it be worse? So I think, you know, this is gonna take a lot of study. It's gonna take a lot of hard work on the part of the House and the Senate and the Governor and the Executive Council if we're gonna get our arms wrapped around this. I have not seen an appetite, I will say, from either side in the Senate to address this at all. But I hear you and your point, and should I be fortunate enough to get back in, let's talk.
Yeah, so how do we make ourselves whole and make it fair? I think Lorna's point was well taken. And actually, if we do spread education funding more adequately, more appropriately and equitably across the state, our district, Senator Innes's district, my district, your district, only stands to benefit from that because we are on the wrong end of this funding scheme. So there's some money there, right? The alternative revenue sources. Let's legalize marijuana. You know, there's tens of millions of dollars right there. Let's stop the blood loss with the interest and dividends tax. But, and this is where he and I are in agreement, for those who have small portfolios, for the 75 or 98%, whatever it is, make exemptions. Because we know that the lion's share of that revenue comes from those who can absolutely afford to pay their fair share. So stop cutting those taxes. I'm okay with allowances for the small folks. What about public-private partnerships? Solar power generation. Let's use state seed capital and let private enterprises run those, and the state gets a cut in perpetuity. Why can't we do this? There's any number of projects we can do with that. So when you cannot do a sales or an income tax because nobody gets elected in this state with something like that, you have to start looking for revenue from here, there, and everywhere to kind of compile it together, spread it across a little bit more evenly. And I think there's a lot we can do. And as the senator says, we have to study it. But there also has to be a willingness to stop giving these ridiculous tax breaks to the people that don't need it.
This guy, right? Wouldn't it be so great to have him as your state senator? I just am so excited to be on the ballot with Stu Green. And I want to say also to those of you who have said, I know that we have several veterans here today, and I want to thank you for your service. So, thank you to all of you. With regard to taxes, I think is the question. You were asking about taxes. The Claremont decisions established that the state of New Hampshire has a constitutional obligation to fairly fund an adequate education. Now, 30 years later, we still have not done that. We have not complied because Republican majorities in the New Hampshire House and Senate have failed to comply. And in fact, more than that, we now have more litigation happening to try and force this to happen again, or to happen. And what have the Republicans done? They have filed an amicus brief, a memo to the Supreme Court saying, actually, instead of complying with the Claremont decisions, we think that the Supreme Court should overturn the Claremont decisions, and that in fact, we don't have an obligation to fund education in New Hampshire at all. They want to completely shirk the responsibility of providing an adequate education to New Hampshire students. This is beyond irresponsible. And in fact, does anyone remember Grover Norquist?
Yes.
Okay? Grover Norquist famously said that his mission was to shrink the size of government to the size that you could flush it down the toilet.
No, drown them in the bathtub.
Grounded in the bathtub.
All of the things.
It ends up in the same place.
Ends up in the same place, exactly. And that is the driving force between the Republican agenda in New Hampshire. And great to talk about Mel Thompson, but that was his agenda too. Starve government, okay? Government is this horrible thing that needs to be starved to the point that you can drown it in the bathtub or flush it down the toilet. I am firm, and you heard me say this in my opening statement, I believe in the power of government to improve people's lives. Public education is the great equalizer. It is the way that we can make sure that people can actually aspire and live up to the American dream. And by not funding an education fairly in New Hampshire, we are depriving the next generation of the ability to live up to their full potential. And from a pragmatic perspective, we are depriving ourselves, the state, of our ability to prosper in the future. We have to fight back against this idea that government is the enemy. Government is all of us. And together, we can fairly fund an adequate education. We can live up to the promise of the American dream.
That amicus brief that's very real. That's relatively recent. And again, if you keep reading on things, you see that they are trying to use the same argument that was used to overturn Dobbs. So anyway, state adequate funding. The estimated cost per pupil is about $20,000 and some change, and the state is now defining an adequate funding for that as $4,100. So that's what the state's paying. The Conville initial ruling raises that to $73.56, and the judge in the case said it should be probably more, closer to $9,000, which would fund about 50% of that. So any way we look at this, they're probably having the state's obligation probably virtually double which means we really need to be creative, we really need to work together. It may throw out some of our cherished dreams of Mel Thompson, again, but that's over 50 years ago. Times have really changed, so we need to add that. I am in favor of increasing the interest and dividend tax for the higher income earners, increasing the room and meals tax. Take advantage, again, of the fact that we're a tourist destination. Let those folks help us out. But if that doesn't come out, then we need to share our money more equitably from wealthier towns to poorer towns. And I know that's a hit for the people there, because they're paying for their kids and more. But there's a lot of people with no children who are paying for everybody's education. And it benefits all of us, regardless if you have children or not. It benefits all of us to have a good education. And we need to find a way, and we need to get together to work this out. No one's going to be happy with the entire results, but we're all going to have to work together and find some pragmatic solutions to this.
We don't need to add any more to that, I don't think.
Okay. Well, Mr. Croft, this is why you only got 3 minutes in the opening. We're running out of time. Can you make real quick closing statements, or do you feel like you've made them already, or what's your wishes?
1 minute each?
You guys can live in
I can do a minute.
Talk really fast.
a minute. Mr. Atlee, a minute.
All right, if they're gonna have me, I'll start the ending. Well, again, thank you for having us here. I really haven't addressed a lot of what my passions are. One of them is education in a lot of different ways that we haven't really addressed. We have not addressed infrastructure a lot. I'm very concerned with bridges. When you look at District 2, we have a lot of Connecticut River, but don't be fooled, because I've gone to the Society of American Engineers to look up the reports on the state of our infrastructure in New Hampshire. It's not good. We have in Concord alone at least 4 red lettered bridges. Again, my bias would be to the river. It's not necessarily so. And education is important to me. I'd like to work with the kids in the schools and have internship programs and get people, kids interested from a lot younger age to be involved in politics and government. And I would be delighted to have your vote on November 5th. If anybody'd like one of my yard signs, I've got those available with me at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you all, and thank you for having me here. Quickly, these are unprecedented times. I have never in the 38 years that I've been in law enforcement saw how difficult it is for us to recruit men and women to get into this profession. I am very blessed. Out of the 27 communities in Merrimack County, I am one of 5 that are full staff. But that also has changed my vision on how I should be responding to the people that I work for, you. I do everything I possibly can for every one of the 27 communities in my community. Investigations, patrol, ICACs, internet crimes against kids, one of my largest problems that we have right now. And I'm not gonna go on, please, know that I'm here for you, and know that my office will do whatever we can for any one of you, and I would look for your vote on the 5th. Thank you so much.
I wanted to start with thanking the town of Webster, thanking the members of the select board for taking this on and allowing this to be a bipartisan event. And I'm very grateful for that people have a chance to hear from both Republicans and Democrats. So the 2 members of the select board that are here today, thank you very much for this. In closing for myself, again, there's a tension between individual freedom and community. And I really want to emphasize that, it's important to respect our individual rights, particularly the rights of privacy, particularly rights of personal autonomy. But it's also important to remember that we have a community, that the community is all of us. And the basic building blocks of that are education, and the ability to watch our fellow citizens rise and become better, and we're better when we work together.
For the past 20 years, I have been working on the most pressing issues facing our state, from helping guide our community through the global economic crisis when I was mayor in 2008 and 2009, working alongside Governor Lynch, whose endorsement I'm really proud to have in this race, to fighting climate change, which we didn't get to talk about today, but is one of my main priorities. I signed on to the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection, and Lebanon has been a leader in sustainability, including being a founding member of the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, which I know that the town of Webster is also a member of, saving money for New Hampshire residents. And this is something that we can do at the state level. I've worked on housing, childcare, and I'm excited to work on these issues at the state level. I'm asking for your vote for me and also for Lorna and Dave and Stu and Maggie Goodlander and Joyce Craig and Kamala Harris, because I know that when we win in November, we will be able to repeal the voucher program, fairly fund education, actually lower property taxes for people in New Hampshire, and make improvements in people's lives. Thank you so much for being here today, and please vote for all of us in November.
I think, as I've been listening to all of this, considering what everybody says, it comes down to this simple question. Are you better off now than you were 8 years ago? I haven't spoken to very many people in this district that would say that they are. Our Republican friends own that. They've been in control for the last 8 years. It's under that regime that property taxes have gone up, but tax cuts have been given to those who don't really need it. We can fix this. And we can do it without a sales or an income tax. We can do it with a little creative thinking, a little bipartisan work. We can absolutely do this, but there has to be willingness to pull it off. I'm running to make the lives of everybody in this district better, across the whole state, to make education more fair, to make it more equitably funded. I want to protect the environment. I don't want to allow more trash to come into the state from out of state. These are simple things. I want to protect reproductive freedom and privacy. It's a conservative position, ironically. I want to go back to the way it was for half a century. I want to make sure that we understand we are not Democrats or Republicans first, but we are Americans. Mm-hmm. That's what we have to get back to. All the rest of this stuff is just policy stuff. And it's a little ironic here because Dan and I have been disagreeing about quite a lot today. But if you saw what we did in NEC on Wednesday, I'd say we're about 70% in alignment on most issues.
It was at least that.
Yeah,
it
was uncomfortable.
Still wondering about it.
It's the new math.
Yeah, it's the new math, yeah. Let's see if it works out any better.
But I think we can do this. And as I said in the beginning, I'm a sworn defender of the Constitution, and I want to bring us back to this place of civility. That's why I'm running, to stitch it back together. No election denial. No tribalistic thinking when you're on the door. Help your neighbor. Let's talk about fair taxes. Let's talk about the basic blocking and tackling movements. And for God's sakes, let's educate our kids so that they can take care of us rural. It's selfish.
I too want to thank you for having me tonight. The biggest thing I'm going to ask you is do your homework on the candidates. All I've heard is get rid of the Republicans, shut the Republicans down. You can't judge a whole group, or if you do, you're wrong. I'm a Republican. I have voted for Democrats. It's for the candidate. That's all I ask. Do your homework and make the right choice for the candidate. You will see, since my opponent was elected, there's been a lot of headlines. I was working there under that, and I'll tell you the headlines are factual. And the answers were always, well, I don't know. I don't have it in front of me. I'm not aware. The agency is not that large. We're not talking about a state agency that something happened down at the other end. Why don't you know? Then maybe you're not doing your job. But like I asked, please do your homework, research it. You will see it out there. There's plenty out there. I left some cards on the table back there. I also have a website. I'd be happy to answer questions if you have any. Thank you for having me.
take a slightly different tack. There's one thing I left out, and it is the environment, and I appreciate you for bringing that up. I am a lover of the environment, protector of the environment. I belong to the Nature Conservancy. I donate to the Sierra Club. The farm that we own, me and my husband, it's 153 acres, as I mentioned. It's in conservation. We're conserving that land. The house is solar. We sell power back to the grid. We believe in the environment. We practice regenerative agriculture. No steroids, no antibiotics ever. I love this state. I love our environment. I love this planet. And you can count on me to always protect our environment here in New Hampshire and our environment in this world. I ask for your vote on November 5th, and I appreciate your comments. Vote for the candidate. Don't vote for the party. Thank you.
I want to thank the town of Loudon, or Webster, and I wish all the other towns had similar forums so that all the towns and the people of the towns could get this. But anyway, I just want to point out that the more you ask the government to do for you, whether it's your town or the state or the federal government, the more you have them do for you, the more they need money, and the money comes from you. Thank you.
So, I want to thank everybody for showing up, including the Republicans. But I would like to call out, I'm sorry, my two opponents chose not to show up. And just to say that they've been in the State House a while, and my opponent is working on not the housing problem, which they claim they're going to fix, but instead is worried about trans and LGBTQ issues, getting rid of the interest and dividends tax, and worrying about gender-affirming surgery in the bedroom issues. And I'm just saying, it's too bad that they didn't show up to defend their position if they think they can.
I want to thank you because y'all were pretty civil. It does show that the political debate can be positive and going forward, because we need to hear both sides and both issues. So thank you all, because it's getting tough to recruit anybody to run for office nowadays. Yeah. So thank you all for standing up and being up here.
Candidate, good luck. Wish you well.
I love that.